So vendors focus on narrow expertise. I think of partners as connecting their work to the broader business context. I think of vendors responding to requests and partners actually anticipating needs and opportunities and filling them, telling me what I need to know, not just what I want to know, because they understand that I don't always have the knowledge to know what I need to know. And I think in some cases, this is not true in all sectors, but a lot of times vendors will compete on price, where partners really tend to focus in positioning themselves among competition based on the value and the outcomes.
Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously. It is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how.
Most business owners settle for being just another vendor when they could actually be irreplaceable partners. Now, being a vendor might work if you're a shop owner, but it's actually a liability if you're a coach, a consultant, or a service provider. And I promise you, this isn't word salad or word magic. I'm not playing with semantics here. The difference fundamentally transforms your client relationships. It can transform your business model. It definitely will transform your level of fulfillment and your long-term profitability. Today, we are going to explore how you can move beyond transactional client relationships into true strategic partnerships. I'm Tonya Kubo, here yet again, as always, with the amazing Gwen Bortner. Today, we are exploring this critical distinction between being just another service provider versus being that true strategic partner to your clients. Now, Gwen, I am going to take you on a little walk down memory lane. Back a few years ago when we started working together in 2022, most listeners already know that when you hired me, you were in the depths of tiny T trauma. What we love to call your tiny T marketing trauma, which was actually based on a history of working with marketing professionals who applied a one-size-fits-all approach to their work with you, and unfortunately just never yielded the results that you were promised. But I, like you, take a personalized approach to the work I do. And so the initial engagement, because you hired me and then you went on this 3-week cruise somewhere. I had all this time that I thought, I am going to do some market research. I'm going to get to know your clients really, really well. And in that introductory period, two things emerged that honestly, I would totally label as weird if it wasn't so dang impressive. Thing number one was that you have truly incredible clients. Just let's take a moment.
It's true. I do. And I remember you saying, your clients are amazing. And I just went, totally took it for granted because I do know my clients are amazing. And you were like, no, at a whole different.
Exactly. Not a dud in the bunch, but also not a problem child, not even what I would call a mildly prickly pear. Two, which is really the inspiration for today's episode, is many of them were loud and proud, committed lifers. So I want you to just take a quick moment, if you can, and tell us the average length of your client engagements and your longest running client relationship to date as of right now.
Of course I can, because I'm a numbers person. I really know that, and I can pull up my spreadsheet that I keep track of, right? So my average length of client is 30 months, so 2.5 years. And my longest running client officially at the end of this month will be 96 months, which is 8 years, which is exactly how long I've been offering this particular service.
And every other service provider just wept a little bit. But there is no need for us to weep because we are going to talk about how this isn't accidental. This is by design. So first, I want to say thank you for the context because I think it's important. I think we have a lot of listeners who want some of what you got going on here. because they're on a sales to delivery roller coaster, right? Constantly having to find new clients to backfill spaces opened by those who exit. And to some degree, we all accept that's the nature of business, right? Every business, every industry expects some measure of churn. But I remember my very first course that I ever took back when I decided I wanted to be a grown-up business owner. And I was told average life cycle of a customer at that time for online businesses was 18 months. And that was 18 months from the moment they got on your email list to hiring you to then exiting to go work with somebody else. And that was fast, right? And they painted that as like only if you do superlative service are you going to get that. So I have this hunch that nowadays we're kind of tired. We kind of don't want to do that if we absolutely don't have to. And I know that there are some, I just want to make sure I'm speaking to the listener here, because I know that there are some service providers who have specialties that lead to short-term engagements, right? You're a wedding photographer. You don't get married every single month. You're a launch strategist, right? You're probably launching a few times a year. Designers, recruiters.
Very upset if I got wedded. My wedding photos took 2 years to get to me.
Yes, that would also be upsetting, right? Right? But it's very short term. Photographers, launch strategists, designers, recruiters, even like the work I do in communities oftentimes is very short term. However, I happen to believe with great confidence that I can speak collectively for everyone involved and say, even when you work on a project basis, you still want to be the service provider on speed dial if the client needs the service again. But that's frequently not the case, right? Because when you're doing project-based work, a lot of times it's out of sight, out of mind. So we get treated like vendors where they're just like, okay, I'm going to put this project out to bid, see who comes in with the lowest bid or the best terms or whatever. But you, Gwen, and I know we talk about this a lot, but it's one of those things where we talk about it so often that I think we lose sight of it being different for other business owners. You develop true partner relationships with your clients.
It's true.
So what gives?
This is one that would technically probably be better to have like all of my clients on and let them tell you why. Right. But I'm gonna tell you what my perspective is on.
Mm-hmm.
The first being, and this throws people off and has thrown them off for a very, 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 very long time, is I don't have any minimum contract engagement time. I'll say other than a month. You pay for a month at the beginning of the month, and that's it.
Okay.
And if at the end of that month, give or take 24 hours truly of the end of that month, you say, yep, this isn't working. It's like, okay, great, we're done. Without any fuss or muss. I mean, we have some steps that we go through, but it's not like, well, you have to submit it in writing and you have to give us 30 days notice, and we get none of that at all. And every once in a while, I know someone who ends up being not a good fit and wants out is actually like saying, I'm going to show you that you don't actually mean what you say. And then I like actually deliver on it. Like, yeah, you can 24 hours notice, we're done. That's cool. Without any guilt on their part either.
No.
Like I'm not going to guilt them about it, because I know I can't do good work with them if they aren't feeling like they're getting good value out of the work. So trying to guilt them to stay isn't actually going to help either of us. I'm going to get frustrated because they're still not going to do the work. They're going to be frustrated because they feel like they're wasting money. I mean, so part of this is having the confidence that the right people will stay. And that the right people will also show up.
Right.
Right. So that to me is the first thing. Related to that, and it's kind of an extension, to that, is their reason to keep paying me is because they're continuing to see value from the work that we're doing together. It's not because, we have a contract that says you have to keep paying me.
Right.
Right. And so that allows them to make the choice. I've had a number of clients over the years who have worked with me for a period of time have stopped because they've said, I feel like I've got what I need right now. Like 99.9% of the time, I totally agree with them. And it's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I stay in touch with them just to check in on them, see how they're doing. No giant, like, you need me now, right? I'm not making a big sales call in the
Right.
conversation. I'm really just like, we spent time together. I'm interested in you.
Mm-hmm.
Let me know what's going on. And from time to time, not always, but time to time, they come back and at another point, it's like, I'm now at a new point that I know you and your insight and the way that you work and the way that we work together will help me get past whatever this thing is that we're dealing with.
Mm.
And then we can work again for a period. And then we may stop. And so it's not like, well, that would have been different if you would have just continued to work with me, because to me, that's all about the journey. And I can't manage someone else's journey. I can
Mm-hmm.
walk alongside them. I can advise them. I can guide them. I can do all of those things. But sometimes it's like, no, this part of the journey I need to do by myself. Okay, great. Do it by yourself. And at a point that you say, oh my God, I want someone with me, I'm happy to come back and be a part of that when it makes sense for both of us. And the fact that that's happened multiple times says a lot. And in some cases, it's like, I don't actually need you back. I just need you back for like an hour. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
great. Sign up with me. We'll have a one-on-one consultation. Good to go. Let me help you. And we're off again. We're off to the races. Great. So not putting my success on them,
Mm-hmm.
right? That I see my success because of what I'm making them do. It's like, no. Their success is their success. I think is part of what allows them to see me as a strategic partner, because I'm not valuing my work based on them. I'm valuing my work
Okay.
based on how they perceive the work.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does.
And I
And
know you have questions and you've watched it a lot. So hit.
well, no, it's the problem, of course, is like there's 6 questions, which would pretty much take us to the end of the episode, and I wouldn't get to any other part of my outline. And it would be good. I just don't know how much value it would be to the listener just to answer, listen to Tonya answer her own curiosity over here. So I know that the average coach and consultant who has learned from all the people that I've learned from and others, instantly is going to kind of not bristle necessarily, but it's going to have some resistance to the idea that you can have long-term clients without a minimum engagement.
Anytime I bring this up in any of my networking referral call, just any of my kind of normal calls, with someone who has typically had an engagement contract,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing they say is, well, how long do they stay with you? And then I, give the numbers that I just gave, and they look at me and their eyes fall out of their head, because they're sure that it will never be as long as their engagement.
Okay, so I just need to know, why do you think that is? Let me clarify the question for you.
Yeah, I've got so many answers to that. Yeah, clarify.
I mean, because on one hand, I know that we believe that people only stay through a minimum engagement because we have been told that that is true, right? I know that because, hi, I'm in marketing. I'm not going to say I personally am responsible for that belief, but I run in circles with the people responsible for those beliefs. So I get that. But then there's also, you would think anybody who's good at their job would have enough outliers in their own experience that would tell them that what they're told is always true is not always true. So I'm just curious from your perspective. I guess what I want to know is where that belief comes from, and also how on earth you didn't own that and didn't adopt that.
So I think this is that concept of best practices are rarely best practices. They're just common practices, which doesn't mean that they're best.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Which goes back to kind of your earlier, statement, right? It's what everyone says you're supposed to do, so it's what I do, right?
Okay.
I think it's also related in that same kind of category of the only way to make sure that your income is stable is to make sure that you have a contract that guarantees your income is stable.
Okay.
Which, it's true. Like, it is possible. I was just looking over at my list. I've got about 15 or 20 clients that right now in various parts of my program that are on my list. And it's true that all of them before the end of the month could say, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be like, both shocked and like kind of in deep dew.
Right.
Right.
Fair.
Right. So I don't have the guarantee of continued income.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I also don't have to get it to re-up in big chunks at a time. Because yeah, someone will drop, but that also means someone else will probably join. And so my income isn't steady, but it's steady enough. It bounces up and down, right? But I think this steady income is also part of where this best practices, but actually common practices comes from.
Okay.
Because you can then predict what's going to happen over the next 12 months. Or I've gotten all the money, so now I have control over when and how I use it.
Yeah.
Depending on what their sales model, if they're paying monthly or not. I mean, there's all of those. I think that's part of it. I think that's part of where it comes from. In some cases, there is reason to actually have the contract because we need for you to actually get through all of these things before you start seeing value.
Right.
And if you aren't financially committed, you'll probably stop before you actually get to value. So I'm not saying that it never works or is never appropriate because that's also
right
true. But that's way less true than it usually is. And so I think that's also part of it, is that some of it came out of that environment where I've got to have you go through this process and this process and this process and this process. And that's going to take 4 months. And then somewhere on month 5 and 6, you're going to start seeing the results. So that's why you have to commit to 6 months at the beginning. Right. Totally makes sense then. I think that's very limited in a lot of the service providing world.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, in my own experience, what definitely would drive a need for that is if the work that you do relies on data. Because a lot of times you're going to need at least 3 months of data to draw any conclusions. So that's like one area where you can definitely lay like, okay, the time it takes is the time it takes. But, and what you're saying, I mean, this also, I think, speaks to, and of course, this is not a marketing podcast, so we're not going to go down this path, but this also speaks to what we're seeing in the marketplace.
Because we can go down both paths. But
we can. But this also speaks to what we're seeing in the marketplace where people are resistant to sign up for long-term engagements as well, right? And it's not because they don't want to stick it out through the painful parts of the engagement. It's not because they don't believe in the service provider. Oftentimes it's simply because they don't know what life has in store for them in the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. And so they hesitate to make any long-term commitments.
Well, and I'll also say, because I've heard almost anyone I've talked to at all about this topic, I've heard them all say at least once, I made the commitment. I either got the result way sooner and I didn't need the rest of the time, or I wasn't getting the result I wanted and there was no way to get them to help me get the result I wanted. Right? And so there's a burn factor.
Yeah.
If I try and get out, they've made it hard. They make, there's penalties, there's all sorts of things. And so there is a resistance to saying, why am I giving you all this money without any evidence that you'll actually get me the thing that you're looking for?
Right.
Right. The thing that I'm looking for. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think almost everybody has had some variant of that experience, which is also one of the reasons I think people are being more hesitant.
Yeah.
For it as well, because a lot of times they'll stay in. It's like, well, I haven't gotten the thing yet, but it must happen at month 9. It must happen at month 10. It must happen at month. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. Right.
And part of that is, the standards like, well, that's a year I'm never going to get back,
Right. Yeah. Year of my life, I will never get back.
I will never get back. So I think that also plays into people's hesitancy.
Mm-hmm.
Only like I said, because I've heard a lot of people talking about that more and more and more.
Yeah. So in my mind, when I think of the characteristics that make up a vendor versus, say, the characteristics that I would consider making up a partner in business, I think that vendors tend to deliver something very specific, a very specific service, a very specific deliverable, whereas a partner contributes to the overall business success. I would say a vendor focuses on their narrow expertise. Yes, we all should stay in our own lane. But, I have met, for instance, I've met people who are ConvertKit experts, but they're like, oh, actually, I only organize your ConvertKit. I won't tell you whether your automations are out of whack or not. I won't tell you whether you have ConvertKit set up to appropriately guide your customer on a journey. I'm just in there to make sure everything's organized. So vendors focus on narrow expertise. I think of partners as connecting their work to the broader business context. I think of vendors responding to requests and partners actually anticipating needs and opportunities and filling them, telling me what I need to know, not just what I want to know, because they understand that I don't always have the knowledge to know what I need to know. And I think in some cases, this is not true in all sectors, but a lot of times vendors will compete on price, where partners really tend to focus in positioning themselves among competition based on the value and the outcomes. Do you have anything to say there? Anything that you think is off base or maybe that you agree with?
No, I think all of that is true. And I also think it's important to know, and I think this is the place where a lot of folks get done a disservice by what I'm going to call social media best practice, memes.
Mm-hmm. I love me a good meme, Gwen. I love me a
It's a
good
way
meme.
overgeneralization, but it's this. I'm taking this information. Everyone says this is true. It's the best way. Blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things is not everybody and not every role, job, service can be a strategic partner.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not we're saying you're better if you're a strategic partner than if you're a vendor. That's not true.
Right.
But where the problem is when you are a vendor and you try to act like a strategic partner,
Mm.
or when you are a strategic partner and you're acting like a vendor.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that one's better than the other, because it's absolutely not true at all. I would never say that. But understanding what you're offering and then designing the business around that so that
Mm-hmm.
that can be as successful as possible, to me, is the really important piece here. And so, just it's the one that pops into my head. If you have a course
Mm-hmm.
really is a vendor activity. It is not a
Correct.
strategic partner, because we're providing information. They're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be taking action on it. It's to get them a specific result. Does that mean, you're bad? No, there's nothing wrong with
Mm-hmm.
that. That's perfectly acceptable. But believing that they should stay in your course for 24 months
Mm-hmm.
and trying to design it so that happens is probably actually not doing anything positive for your business.
Right. Well, and also, and partially, right, courses are priced that way, right? You pay one fee, you start, you finish. I mean, you're right. It is definitely, I would think of, even if a course creator has a consulting or a service providing component, the course business itself is very much a vendor business. And that was actually what had me thinking about this episode and kind of coming to the table with this, because what I see in the marketplace, what I've seen for years, is people are course creators and they're really happy course creators. They are so stinking happy having their $297, $497 courses out there. They run some social media ads to it. They get some PayPal deposits. Life is good. But then maybe they go to a webinar, but they take a course. They hire a coach or consultant, and the coach or consultant tells them that the big bucks lies in high ticket consulting, high ticket coaching services. And so now they find themselves in the position of service provider, but the business model that got them there is not the same. And so they still have course creator mindset, and they're still like, I'm trying to think of how to put it, and maybe you can find the words for me, but it's like they're still approaching the relationship as if they were a course creator, where I have presented the material step by step by step, the best I know how to present. You either do it or you don't. They're not actually in a place where they want to, or maybe even have the ability to guide the client along the bumpy road.
Well, and as you were saying that, I was cracking up because it's absolutely true in the opposite direction as well. You have someone who loves doing one-on-one work, who's really good at being a strategic partner, and someone comes in and says, oh, but the way to make a lot of money is build a course and scale by having all of this done automatically.
Work one to many, Gwen, one to many.
One to many. Oh my God, the one to many. And that is the exact same problem in the opposite direction. Neither one is actually right. They're each right for the right person.
Right.
And trying to force, for any reason, best intentions into the other direction isn't necessarily good. It's not good advice, right? You know, we both have our Context Matters cups today, I noticed. Context matters. And part of the context is what actually lights you up, what works for you, what makes you happy.
Right.
As the owner, CEO, founder, you know, however you define yourself, business owner, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I was laughing, because it's like, oh yeah, absolutely true this way, but it's 100% true the other way, and both are as bad information.
Yeah. Well, and I think
The
to your point, right? It's like, okay, if you can be really happy doing one, you could be really happy and successful both doing the other. There are people who can be happy and successful doing both. I think what you're saying, though, the key is you got to know what you're doing, when you're doing it, and it really does have to fit in with your own definition of what success looks like for you, your business, your lifestyle, and all those things.
Well, and you know, I talk about this with my clients all the time, that they'll say, oh, I want to do this other thing. And it's like, you need to be prepared. That functionally is a completely different business than this business that you're currently doing. It feels like it's the same business. It's not the same business.
Yeah.
And so, and this would be an example, you know, that we're using here of courses is one business and one business model. And, you know, we'll just say one-to-one consulting. I mean, there's a whole lot of variance in here, but one-to-one consulting is a very, very different business model. And if you're going to do both, you need to know that you may be functionally running two separate businesses, even though it feels like it's one business, which is often why that world falls apart, because we're trying to still run it as one business, and it's not one business.
Yeah.
Like two divisions of one business.
Right.
We're not thinking of it as a division. We're thinking it's the same thing. It's just it's a different product. And it's like, no, it's more than just a different product.
Right. Well, I would equate it. It's the equivalent of education, right? You can go, I went to a very small school. So it was K to 12. You just crossed a parking lot to go from elementary to junior high and junior high to high school. And while they were in the business of educating us, right? The goal and outcome of the elementary program is very different from the junior high program, which is entirely different from the high school program, right? Elementary program, they want to make sure we can read, we can write, we are positioned for success later on. But in high school, it's all about, are you prepared for college? Are you prepared for the workforce? Totally different business models if you think about it, even if it's under the same umbrella.
Right.
So for the listener who says, okay, I kind of think I know what you're talking about, Tonya. You're saying a lot of words here. Gwen's making it a little bit more clear, though. Who says, okay, but I could see where my business and my clients would benefit if they viewed me less as a vendor and more like a partner. What are the steps I need to take? In my mind, the first step, I think, would be you've got to change how you talk about your business and what you offer? What would you say?
Yeah, I think that's true. And back to when we first started working together, one of the
Mhm.
challenges that, quote unquote, all the marketing people say is, is what are your results?
Mhm.
And I always bristle
Mhm.
at that question,
Right.
right? Because, and finally, like, quite honestly, it's only been
Mhm.
I don't know, in the last 6 months or so that I finally have got my answer. And my answer is I don't actually get any results.
Mhm.
I hold my clients accountable to get their own results.
Right.
And I think that that's the huge shift of
Mm.
being strategic is I'm not saying I'm going to get you this thing,
Yeah.
right? Because it's back to it's not about me. It's
Mhm.
not about me at all. Whether I can 10x your business in 3 years or I can make it possible that you don't have to work in your business at all, it still runs and you can be fully focused on your family. Those,
Mhm.
those are
Yeah.
both results I have gotten clients, but those are not my results.
Right.
Those are their results. I didn't actually do anything to
Mhm.
get them their results. And if they weren't willing to do the work, it would have never happened.
Right.
Unlike I'm, going to deliver you a course.
Mhm.
But still, in that case, I can't get you the results. You actually have to watch the course, do the work, get
Right.
the things. But the real result is I'm going to deliver you all of this material.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
And I think what you're talking about, right, is it's shifting those conversations from a focus on deliverables. This is what you're going to have in your hand when you walk away to what are the outcomes. And where I've seen this, because I think this is a good example, where I've seen this most recently is, because I have a lot of authors as clients. And, there was a time where you'd hire a book coach and the book coach would say, okay, after X amount of time, you'll have a manuscript. After X amount of time, you'll have a book outline. After an X amount of time, you'll have a proposal. And because that's really all they can promise. They can't promise you a traditional book deal, right? They can't promise you X number of book sales. Like that's out of everybody's control. And they're smart enough to know that they can't make those promises. But now what I see kind of in the messaging that I'm surrounded by is I can promise that you're going to get farther on the project than you were alone, right? Because if you could write the book all by yourself, you would have done it already. You haven't. So I can't promise you that we're going to get through 50,000 words, but I can promise you we're going to get farther on that manuscript than you did all by yourself, right? Which is, I think, an example of the difference between looking at deliverables versus outcomes, even if the service you provide, people expect a promise of a deliverable.
Right. People will ask me, it's like, so what do you deliver? It's like, I deliver absolutely nothing. And it's like, really, I don't actually deliver anything. What I do is ask you really hard questions and help you figure out what are the things that you've got to do and how to do that. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is so rare that someone gets something from me that I have created.
Well, and I would argue, yeah. And, and in this case, and this is something where, a listener who's thinking about doing this is going to have to decide if this is true for them. Because you don't create anything and hand it over, clients never have to feel bad about not doing what you suggest, right? They don't ghost you either because they don't have to hide their head in the sand. Gwen did all this stuff for me and I did nothing. They just go, at the most I've heard is, yeah, Gwen's been telling me to do this for 6 months. I was finally ready to do it. And I'll always say oh, and you stuck it out for 6 months. Yeah, well, Gwen said when I was ready, I would do it, right? That made it feel safe. So the practical steps, I think, for transforming the client relationships into partnerships, if that's something that you desire, is you first have to start having those client conversations a little bit differently where you're focusing more on the outcomes versus the deliverables. I think you also have to ask better questions. And yeah, I'm using that tone of voice on you, okay? You would see my mom face if you were watching on YouTube. And the reason I say this is because I know, because I was that service provider early in my career, we ask just enough questions to do the thing that we feel comfortable doing or that we want to do for the client, we think the client needs. But oftentimes when we're asking questions that are that targeted, we are missing the broader context that would let us know that our deliverable is not the right fit for them or could give us the insight that we need to tweak whatever the deliverable is. So I think you've got to ask questions that help you appreciate the context even beyond whatever the acute problem is. Do you want to add anything to that piece?
Oh, no, that is 100% right on. And, you personally have given a great example of, and I think it was on a previous podcast, but if not, where someone was saying we want to increase our sales by, 15 or 20% or something. And for the first year or two, you're like, okay, well, that's the goal. And then at some point you said, so how much have you ever increased it? It was like 2%. It was like, okay, then there's no reason for us to believe that we can go from 2 to 15. Maybe we go from 2 to 4.
Right. It was a very discouraging experience.
The thing is the reason we feel like we're failing is we have said, what I want to do is land on the moon. And it's like, how much access do you have to a rocket? And it's like, oh, none. I'm just here at the house.
Yeah.
It's like, that's probably not ever going to happen. It could, weird miracles do happen. But it's like, yeah, I don't think that when you don't land on the moon, we need to not feel bad about that.
Exactly. Right. And I think that the third step, what most people would say is you've got to create a framework, right? Because a framework makes you a strategist, Gwen. I don't know if you know that, but that's what I've heard. Frameworks make you a strategist, right? But I happen to know that you have a teensy-weensy bone to pick with the term frame, not necessarily the term framework, but how people apply frameworks. And so I'm just going to let you tell me why that's not the next step.
And if they were watching YouTube, they saw me just lose it. She promised.
Politely. She lost it politely, folks.
I did. I was just giggling really hard. A framework can be super useful. I'm not going to say that it's not. But a framework often implies that I have the answer to every problem.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a real framework, truly like a wireframe, that could be true, where there's a lot of space that's not filled in. But framework has started to really mean I have a 10-step process. And you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this. And we've talked about this before, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, 10,000 times more over time, is then the person receiving the framework feels like a failure when it doesn't absolutely positively deliver what the person said it was going to deliver. And most of the time, it's not their fault. Like, they've been doing all the things. And it's like, but I'm not getting the result. And it must be me. I must be stupid. I must be inadequate. I must be, It's like, no, it's too prescriptive for your situation. And so frameworks are not the end all by a long shot. But understanding, and I would say the other piece is understanding what is your lane, right? And not trying to go too far out of your lane. My lane is broad, but it's not overly deep. And so one of the things that, for my particular business, which I think throws people off, is I am not a finance person. I am not an HR person. I am not a mindset person. I am not a technology person. I'm not even a systems person, which everyone thinks I am. I am not a goals person. I am not a leadership person. But I do address all of those at a very high strategic level.
Right.
But as soon as we get just a little bit deep, I bring in an expert in that lane.
Right.
Right. So my lane is a weird lane because it crosses, it's more like a crosswalk than it is a lane. But I also know when I'm stepping outside of the crosswalk.
Right.
Right. And I think that's the key to really being able to do good strategy, is to not take my strategy that I know that fits here and try to make it fit here.
Right.
Across the, this narrow piece, and try to say, I can apply it to everything related to the business, because it's not true.
Right. And so what you're really saying is being a strategic partner does not mean you have to have all the answers.
Totally not.
In fact, if anything, it's getting really comfortable admitting what answers you have and what answers you don't.
Yeah.
Where
I
back,
often will say, okay, we've moved above my pay grade.
yeah.
And what I mean is, okay, I'm now stepping outside of the
Mhm.
crosswalk. These are the couple things I think. This is what you need to check. You need to talk with someone who actually knows. And that's not me.
Yeah. Okay. So one last thing I think in terms of how you transform the client relationships, because we've got, shifting those conversations from deliverables to outcomes, asking questions that reveal the greater business context. You've talked about the pros and cons of frameworks. They're not bad, right? But they're not the end all be all solution that some people like to think they are. The final one is one that I have seen you do. And I'm not going to lie, as a formerly deliverables focused service provider, has caused me great discomfort, except you haven't died yet, so I know it's safe to do, but which is building trust through appropriate pushback and challenging assumptions of the client. See, when you're a vendor, you very rarely argue with your client. Customer's always right, remember? What they get is what they want. Maybe charge a, pain in the butt tax if you need to, and you are not a yes person to your clients. And that they still stick with you for 2.5 to 8 years.
So, and in most cases, that is the biggest value I provide. Now, I'm also okay with me pushing back and them saying F you and dropping.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other side of this. And not everybody can be okay with that. So this is not like all you have to do is push back and you're going to be amazing.
Right.
It's not just pushing back. It's also knowing when to push back, where to push back, those
Mhm.
things. But I remember like one of the very first calls you were on, after we got off the call, you said really hard things to her. And in this case, this was a woman I had zero prior relationship with.
It was your first session.
Most of the time even when it's their first session, we've had ongoing conversations. We've seen each other in other. This was not the case with this one. This was an unusual situation for me. And you're like, you said really, and I'm like, did I? like that was my first.
You were
Like,
oblivious.
what are you talking about? But what it was I'm able to do in a way that is not accusatory.
Right.
And so that's part of the reason why the pushback is accepted.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I know the other reason it's on your mind is we were on a call just like yesterday with a client. And I've said, when I push back, there's a point that this client just completely will shut down. And the first couple times I was pretty sure I was getting fired. I was done. And I think this is the first time you've actually experienced it.
Yes, I believe I will forevermore call it resting serial killer face.
that it was like, I'm going to kill you. Right? Now, I have now been working with this client for a really, really, really long time. So I've learned it's like, oh, I'm actually hitting a nerve. And I need to like tiptoe around this, but I don't need to like completely back off. Right. But the first time I was sure I was fired. Second time I was pretty sure I was fired. By the third time I was like, oh, this is right. But that's also being okay with that. And being able to sit in this very, very uncomfortable space.
Yeah.
And knowing that someone at some point will absolutely lash out and being able to be okay with that.
Right.
I know I am.
Yeah. I mean, really what you're saying is the shift from vendor to partner is not going to happen overnight. Like if that's the bed you've made and you want out of the bed, it's not going to happen overnight. It will, though, transform the value you provide and how your business operates. And moving forward, by selecting the right clients, establishing partnership expectations from day one, which is something you just unpacked for us beautifully on how you do that. And structuring your business to support those deeper relationships, you can, assuming you want it, create a much more sustainable business model than you may be currently having. And if you want an example, like a living example of that loving, kind pushback that Gwen sometimes provides, you should really check out Insight to Impact. It is our high-touch weekly, I would call it a premium accountability subscription that gives you the perspective you need to make the strategic shift with confidence Every Friday, you get a thought-provoking question that is designed to help you examine your business on a deeper level. When you respond, Gwen will give you that personal feedback. Sometimes it'll be, yay, great job. And other times it'll be like, I don't know about that. And she might add a few extra words in there. But in either case, you'll find yourself making forward progress and understanding what true partnership really feels like. Head over to everydayeffectiveness.com/impact to learn more.
Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallyWant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.